Welcome. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I know you have a lot of options for sessions, and I'm very happy to see all of you here. I see I have some friends, people that came to some sessions this week already. Um, I have a couple of questions because we can't quite start. We still need to wait 3 minutes in case if there are more attendees coming. How many of you have used Jenkins? Okay, so we have some. Are you guys developers or your organizations are using Jenkins? Do we have any? We know I have at least a developer, but do we have more than one developer with us here? Okay, we have a few. Um, we are going to go next like 45 minutes to show you how we can automate automation workflows that we all create and how to make it easier for us. My background, I'm a network engineer. Probably I shouldn't ask, but I'll ask how many are network engineers here? Probably everybody, right? So I think we are kind of in a transition where we need to learn some of these tools, be able to partner with the developers because they can help us. They have a lot of skill that maybe some of us don't have, and really accelerate the adoption and basically deliver services either for our customers if you are working for a partner or in your organization. How many of you use Cisco DNA Center currently in a lab or production? Thank you. Do you have any workflows that you automated with DNS Center REST APIs or with event notifications? Do you? So at the end of the session, I will share with you quite a bit of resources for sample code. Of course, everything that you are going to see in the session will be shared with you in a repo, all the Jenkins pipelines, all the Python applications. I had earlier this week another session that covered infrastructure as code use cases using Terraform, Ansible, and the Python SDK. And if you are interested, ping me in the WebEx room for this meeting, for this session, and I can share with you that repo or even the session presentation if you are interested in. So let's get started. I have a lot of content. Hopefully, we'll finish in time. But everything you are seeing here will be posted in this room. Please join the room. I'm not going to send you a lot of messages. I'll send you only what's important about a session, relevant links for content for this session, and also you are going to find here recordings for all the demos for basically everything that will be included in this session. The presentation has some hidden slides. I don't have time to cover everything, but it will be included in this WebEx room. So I should start maybe first with my name, Gabi Zapodeanu. I'm a technical marketing engineer. I am focused on Cisco DNA Center APIs and integrations. My background, I'm a network engineer for almost 25 years. I have started to look at infrastructure as code, as using code to manage network infrastructure about 7 years ago. Last 4 years, I have been a TME working with Cisco DNA Center APIs and integrations. This is what we are going to cover next 45 minutes. Cisco DNA Center platform, a quick overview. We are going to talk about Jenkins, our open source integration that we published probably about a year ago, and we'll go over a lot of different pipelines. So what is the problem we try to resolve with Jenkins? And again, I don't want you to think Jenkins is the only platform. Jenkins is one platform that you could use. I'm using Jenkins because I had the opportunity in Cisco to find resources. We use Jenkins in our engineering, so I had an opportunity to work with Jenkins engineers, run some ideas by them. I got some coaching. They checked my pipelines to be sure that I'm following the best practices. But there are other platforms that do exactly the same. So I'm not trying to sell you on Jenkins. Jenkins, the version I use, it's an open source one. It's free. So you can use exactly the same platform, but exactly the same concepts apply if you want to use any other platforms. So the problem we try to resolve is we want to accelerate the adoption of services or delivering services in a different way. We all work on automation workflows that we developed using Cisco Data Center REST APIs or iOS XE APIs, NetConf, RESTConf, the device APIs, and we want to run those workflows without us having to click every time we need to run a workflow. Where we need to run workflows that are going to be a little bit more complex, that you are going to see are not easy for us to build. These platforms like Jenkins will enable us to do these things because that's what they are good for. for automation of any tasks that we are interested in. So let's take a look at Cisco DNS Center platform. The platform, Cisco DNS Center manages network devices, physical and virtual devices. And as we manage these network devices, most of the features, capabilities, everything we do with Cisco DNS Center is going to be exposed either northbound REST APIs, and that's what we are going to use today. And we have a number of libraries, Python SDK, Ansible collection, and Terraform provider. And we have the open source integration with Jenkins. Or exactly the same APIs to, let's say, interact with Cisco DNS Center could be used for building integrations, could be a custom integration with a third-party platform, or could be the out-of-the-box integrations we use for PagerDuty, Splunk, ServiceNow, or WebEx. So a lot of everything that you want to do with Cisco DNS Center can be automated, and I would say should be automated. We shouldn't do anything that is very repetitive, that takes time, or maybe things that are not, basically there isn't really a lot of value for our skills as network engineers, let's say to configure 100 devices every few days or every few weeks. Jenkins open source integration has been published by us about a year ago, and it was a need because we started to look at what is our journey as network engineers and how can we help you and your teams accelerate this DevOps journey. How many of you feel that you start in this way? You are the guy or girl that starts to write some automation scripts. And then you are starting to share some of them with your peers. But most of us, maybe I'm running like a Mac. Sometimes early days, I was running some automation scripts on Linux. Maybe we have some Windows. There are going to be some differences between all of these platforms that are being used by our teams. But also at the same time, the software that I'm sharing with you could be outdated. And how many of you do we really have always a best practice before I run an application? I'm going to check for the latest version of that script that was published by my peer on GitHub. So that doesn't really happen. And we had another problem because we started to have, we are losing visibility. Who's running these automation scripts? Are they network engineers? They should do this. We are starting to have very little reporting. We don't know a lot of what's going on in our environment. Jenkins will help us to unify this approach. We are all going to run all of these automation workflows on a platform that will automate things for us. So instead of us running it locally on our machines, I'm going to run everything on a platform. Every time I'm running that script, I'm going to build a container with exactly the same specs. And me or any one of you, if we use the same Jenkins platform or the same pipeline, even if you use it in your environment, but I'm going to give you a pipeline, it will be built exactly the same as in mine. So now the outcomes are going to be very consistent. We are absolutely going to have very good visibility. We'll know who ran what application, what time, what was the output of that application. We have the ability to always pull the latest code from GitHub with the latest features, enhancements, bug fixes, security policies, everything that we need. And in this way, we will be able to really accelerate. It's not going to be only one or two of us in our organizations running applications. It's going to be much more, a lot more of the network engineers will be able to focus, to run these applications. The network engineer, all we need to do at that point is provide the intent. What is the configuration? What do I want this application to do? The network engineer and the developers will actually build the automation workflows that are going to be certified, validated, tested, used by the entire organization. So what is Jenkins? They define themselves as an automation server that is good to automate all sorts of things. And this is exactly what we are going to use it. Jenkins can do a CI/CD pipeline, a complete software development. That's not what we are going to use it for. In our case here today, we are going to use it to automate workflows that are designed for infrastructure as code. I'm going to use Jenkins instead of running everything local or on a Linux server. I'm going to use it to run workflows that will automate infrastructure using Cisco DNS Center REST APIs. Or you can use, and you are going to see, I have a demo later for one of the pipelines. I'm going to use also DNS Center REST APIs and Meraki APIs. To create a basic pipeline, for those that we have quite a bit of us that have not seen Jenkins till today, to create a new pipeline is very simple. I'm going to basically create a new item, and I'm going to provide a name, define that this will be a pipeline, and then I will basically, it's not really a lot more than this, I will be provided a template. So this template, I need very few things to really finalize my first pipeline. I'm going to decide which Docker image I want to use. In my cases today, I'm going to use the latest version for the Docker image for Python. But if you want to use a specific Docker image, you can specify there. Once you specify that, you have the option to select specific stages and steps and the post task. What do you want to do at the very end with that Docker container? So this is a valid pipeline. If you are going to run this pipeline, and you are going to see next slide, you are going to see that it builds a container, but doesn't do anything because I don't need anything else that I want from this pipeline. Currently, it doesn't know what else to do, what else to run on this container. The steps could be shell commands, like I want to install a specific library for, let's say, the Python, Cisco DNS Center Python SDK. Could be shell commands to create a directory, to read information, to basically pull information or push information to a specific repo in GitHub. I could do a lot of different things with these shell commands, or I can run code. And this code could be anything. And that's one advantage of using Jenkins versus, let's say, Ansible or some other platforms. If I have some pipelines that I'm going to use the Python SDK, I can run them as equally I can run pipelines that we use Ansible or Terraform. And actually, I have one pipeline that I believe is shared with you, and if it's not, I can share it with you, that it builds a container, I call it DevReady. It has all the libraries for Cisco DNS Center installed, so I can run any project on that container without me having to install every time a new environment, build all the libraries, all the requirements that I need. So let's take a look at building a job. Building a job is running that pipeline. So in this case, there are two steps. I build the environment, and I have a post action. I destroy that container. It's pretty straightforward. So what we really need to do now, after we learned about how to basically build the pipeline, is to start to add some functionality, because this doesn't really solve anything. It's just the first step. I can build a container. I can destroy it. I know everything is good. Now we'll add actually actions that we want this pipeline, we want to execute to automate something with Cisco DNS Center REST APIs. The console is very important because that's where you are going to see if you have a problem, if you have the application has some issues, if you are going to have any problems with the API calls that you are making, maybe credentials for GitHub are not correct. That's where you are going to find information that will be very useful for both the activity, what's going on with your pipeline, but also from security perspective, what happened when in the past. So this is my Jenkins dashboard. I have a number of different pipelines. We are going to cover only a few of them today. I will cover the CLI template deployment. We will talk about a template for Jenkins file template. We will cover device inventory, and SDS code is included in presentation. I will share it with you. I don't have time to talk about that. And at the end, we'll finish with the POE sustainability. So let's get started. The Jenkins CLI template deployment is a very simple pipeline. The network engineer, us, are creating the intent configurations. What do I want these devices to be configured? And if you came to the session that I had Monday, we can define intent in many different ways. Today, I'm going to define intent that I want some devices to be configured first in the lab, test in the lab, and then in production. How many of you have a very good process to test something in the lab before you deploy in production? We have very few, and some are tentative. Well, with Jenkins, we can automate this process. So this is a great thing. Okay, I can test something in the lab. Jenkins will do it for me. And if everything looks good, I can either have a user input to continue in production, or I can automatically continue in production. I will update the project to GitHub. Then Jenkins could receive a notification and start executing this. In my organization, InfoSec is not going to allow me to get any GitHub actions in my organization, so I'm going to run this pipeline manually. And then we'll build a container, we'll install all the libraries, we'll download code from GitHub, and we'll start calling Cisco Data Center REST APIs to deploy these templates, provision devices, add devices to sites, create fabrics, anything we need would follow exactly the same workflow. At the end, there will be a report created that will be updated to GitHub and locally. So in that way, we all know next day when this ran 7 p.m. in the evening during the maintenance window, what happened. We could even get event notifications, let's say either WebEx or some other methods to know, hey, I completed, everything was good. So while we maybe watch the show on TV, everything goes on for us, so we see everything completed, we don't need to worry about anything. We are going to look next day to the report, verify if there are any issues, if something didn't complete, address next maintenance window. So this is what the pipeline project in this case looks. I have a list of devices I want to configure in the lab, a list of devices in production. I'm going to create a project, a name, and a CLI template, because I want to create a new interface loopback across my entire infrastructure so I can define some parameters with each of these loopbacks that I'm going to configure. These are the steps, and don't bother reading this. It will be included in the presentation. You are going to see all the steps and all the stages and everything Jenkins will do, and actually we'll have a demo. You are going to see them executed by Jenkins. I'm going to obviously have Git operations. I'm going to install libraries. I'm going to run the Python application against the lab, against the production. I'm going to create a report. And again, all of these workflows could be developed in any of these platforms, automation tools like Terraform or Ansible. I'm using, to be honest, for demos, Python SDK, because to install Ansible on a Docker might take a little bit too long, and you might get bored waiting for that installation to complete. So for the speed of actually installing the Python, Cisco Data Center Python SDK is a lot easier for me to do demos. But again, I have a dev-ready box. I can share with you the pipeline if you want to use Terraform or Ansible. This is what is predefined, stage, basically verified, tested by the developers and the network engineers. They need our help to build these pipelines and the code. We need their help, especially from a code production ready perspective. We need to be able to test this code to follow all the best practices for software development. So let's very quickly look at this pipeline. You're going to see it in the demo. I'll pick the container. For me, it's not important to run a specific version of Python. I will then have some environment variables, like what is the Jenkins repo name that I want to pull information from, what is the repo with all the templates. I need to provide a GitHub token that is saved in the credentials for Jenkins. I have a slide that shows you how to do that. Then we are going to start building the Python environment. These are all shell commands. We do this every time we build a virtual environment for Python. We are going to install all the requirements, all the Python libraries that I need. I'm going to do all of these steps again and again and again every time we start a new project. Jenkins will do it for me. I don't need to install any libraries. I can install all the libraries I need, and I can verify if those installed correctly or not. Then I will start to download code from GitHub. Those are the templates that I need. I'm going to start to deploy it to lab. And then I'm going to start to deploy it to production. Again, if with Jenkins, by default, if a step fails, so let's say if for any reason deploying to lab fails, then all the other steps are going to be skipped till the closing stages. So for me, it's a very basic way. If I'm trying to deploy something to the lab and it fails, I'm now going to go to production. But between these two, we can have an input from a user that we could add and wait for that input before we continue. Then I'm going to have the report. I'm going to publish it to GitHub, and I will remove the Docker container. At this point, for this pipeline, I don't need this Docker container to be reused. You are going to see later with our pipelines that I started to add some optimizations to save a little bit of time and start to reuse some of these libraries that I downloaded from internet. The Python application is very simple. It's a very straightforward. I'm going to call Cisco Data Center REST APIs to create a template. to create, basically deploy the template to a number of devices, and then create a report to update me on what was successful or not. The console output, what you are going to see in the demo, includes all the information regarding everything that is going on. In my application in Python, I'm going to log everything because I want to see what is the output, and logging will allow me to have that visibility in Jenkins. So these are the steps where now I'm going to download all the libraries and install them. Then I'm going to verify what are all the libraries that have been installed in my Docker container. If it fails, I want to know it failed because a library wasn't installed correctly or something else that happened. Then I'm going to verify the application files. I'm going to start to download templates from GitHub, and I'm going to start to deploy to the lab. Again, all the steps, everything that my application does is visible if I'm logging in Python here. So in this way, we would have one place in the console output everything that happened with this pipeline, with the execution of the Python application, and I can go back to this. If I want to save it for months and months, I could go back and identify what happened, what time. And then I'm going to go to production. The report, you can see here that I had some devices that had been successfully configured. The cloud services routers, those are the ones that I wanted to configure with the new loopback. In my lab, and I have a small lab, sometimes if I need to configure a few devices for a demo, this is the way I do it because it's so much easier. I'm going to create a CLI template, I'm going to start Jenkins, run it, and I'm done. It's a lot easier than actually trying to do it with any other workflow, build an environment, build a Python environment, install all the libraries. It will be much easier even for you as an engineer if you are looking to start with Jenkins, to start to use it only for what you want. But once you actually have the knowledge and you build it on a server, share this knowledge with all of your organization. It's going to be a lot easier. Anybody can run one of these jobs from a Jenkins platform. This is what you are going to see in the dashboard. The last execution, the last, in my case, I have it configured for 5 executions. What was the status for each execution, average time for each of the stages, and the average time for the execution of this pipeline. This is important because you want to know why it failed, like these stages failed. And they failed because, for example, when I ran this pipeline, I wasn't connected with the VPN to the Cisco network. So, of course, I couldn't reach the Cisco DNS Center REST APIs to perform any tasks. I couldn't even get, obviously, the Cisco DNS Center auth token. So let's look at the demo. So you can see here the pipeline. I'm going to build it manually. Ideal would be that you would have a scheduler. You are going to see in the next example how to build a schedule. But ideal would be you'd have a schedule 7 p.m. during maintenance window, and that will be when it triggers and identifies if there are any new configurations that need to be deployed to the environment. You can see here my Docker container starts to download all the libraries that I have specified in the file that is part of the project. Then it will start to install them. Then I'm going to check to see if everything installed correctly. And I'm going to start then to download our important information, which are the templates, which include what is the lab device, what are the production devices. And I'm starting to call Cisco DNS Center REST APIs to deploy that template to the lab. Once the deployment is completed, for example, right now I'm pushing the template to the lab device. Again, everything is defined in one file. The Cisco DNS Center clusters I want to talk, the lab devices I want to configure, the production devices, and then basically the CLI template that I want to deploy. Then we can start to go in production. And now we are going to create again the templates. It is exactly the same application that deploys it to the lab and deploys to production. We are going to use one application because in that way it's easier. And then we are going to deploy templates to each of these devices. This application can be optimized. I can deploy a template to multiple devices at the same time. In my case, I do it one device at a time, but there are multiple ways to optimize this to make it even faster. It completes typically in around 4 minutes, but you certainly can accelerate this and optimize it if you need to go in production. And we can see here it completed successfully. It went through the lab. It went through the production devices. And we can find out the report with what was the template configured on which devices and if it was successful on each device or not. If that device is not reachable, is not managed by Cisco DNS Center, it will fail. Difficult, easy, interesting, good to know. Let's take a look at another use case. So this time is a use case that I presented earlier this week, device inventory. There are a lot of times when we need to have an accurate device inventory for all the devices that are managed by Cisco DNS Center. And we need to go back maybe 6 months ago or a year ago and know what devices did we add to the inventory, when did we add them, what was the software version, identify when we did a software upgrade on a device, the location, where the device was changed from one location to another. It is a lot of value for asset management platforms as well. But exactly the same pipeline, the device inventory, could be used for other applications. Maybe I want to build a pipeline that runs every few minutes or every day and collect all the running configuration for all my devices in the inventory because I want to have a backup. I need to have a backup for audits to go back maybe a year ago or 2 years ago and know exactly what was the configuration of those devices. So in this case, the pipeline will follow almost the same steps. It will build the Python environment, install the libraries, will basically collect the device inventory, will publish some information to GitHub, and then will take some actions at the end. But the difference for this pipeline will run automatically every 15 minutes. I don't need to do anything. If I turn this on and I build a schedule, it will run for me every 15 minutes. If I need it every day once or every week, certainly you can make that schedule. So this is how you build the schedule. For example, in this case, every hour divided by 15, basically it's every 15 minutes, and I will run it every single day, and basically every month it will be ongoing for as long as Jenkins server is up. But there are other options that I could use. I can trigger a pipeline with an API. So this is useful. Think about this. I may have an API call to a pipeline that may take some actions based on an event that we detected on Cisco DNS Center. So we can take potentially some corrective actions, collect some information from devices. We see we had a network issue, and I can collect everything from those devices that are impacted by the network issue at the time the issue is occurring without us having to run that manually. I can do it periodically like here, GitHub action. I'm going to receive a notification. There is a repo that was changed. This is powerful. For example, in the next use case, the software-defined access as code, I could push my configuration for a new fabric to GitHub. As soon as that repo is changed, Jenkins will be notified, will download the fabric, and will start to deploy that fabric. We can do this for a lot of different workflows. Or after our build is finished. In my case, I'm using a schedule, and you have here, Jenkins is extremely good to give you all the information you need to know how to build the schedule, it will even tell you, if you are trying to build a schedule that doesn't follow their best practices, it will inform you, hey, this is how we recommend to do it. Or if it's incorrect, it will obviously tell you, you need to correct it because you didn't type the right syntax. So let's look at a very quick device inventory demo. In this case, I'm going to run it manually, but again, it is scheduled to run every 15 minutes. For example, in this case, I'm running it. I started this execution. You are seeing exactly the same steps. You are already familiar. I'm going to download all the libraries, install the libraries, collect the device inventory, publish the device inventory to GitHub. If I run it, and to be honest, at some point I forgot to turn this off, the schedule, and every 15 minutes for a day or so, my CPU on the Mac was ramping up. It's like, what's going on? And then I started to dig, and I found that Jenkins was still running on my laptop. Docker is always running on my laptop, so it ran a few hundred times without me, throughout the night, next day morning, without me needing to have it to run, of course. But it was interesting to see that it will always operate. It will do this work for you. You don't need, once you have the application, it's tested, it's validated, you turn on the schedule and you are done. You can look at the monitor, basically to monitor the results in the report. So I'm pushing this GitHub file, basically files to GitHub, and you are going to see, I believe that those files have been updated. In interest of time, I'll skip through the GitHub. You can see it very quickly here. Last time was 4 days ago. I'll refresh and it will be now. As I said, software-defined access pipeline is included with the hidden slides. I don't have time to cover that because I built something new for this session. Because I received some feedback in the past. It's like, well, this is just another tool I need to learn. It's hard. Why should I learn it? So I decided, how could I make this easier for all of us? So I decided to build a pipeline template to make it as easy as we can for us to start with a pipeline. And then I decided, why wouldn't I use this template that I'm telling you to use to actually build a pipeline and see how it goes? So this pipeline template is designed so you have to update only this section of your pipeline. In the environment variables, you have to define, obviously you need your token, the username for your GitHub. You need to define a pipeline name that is going to be in the logging in the console. You need to define the application that you want to use, the GitHub repo that you want to use. There's the only information that you need for most of the pipelines. And then maybe if you need at the very end the output folder, you need to check if you have any output, and if you don't, you need to remove that step. But with very few simple steps, you can copy this pipeline and build a new one that will be ready for your application. You still need the application. You still need the Python application, Ansible, or Terraform to be built. But you do not need, if you are using Python, this is all you need. You do not need to build a pipeline again and again and again for a typical automation workflow. So let's take a look at what this pipeline will do. So I built a Power over Ethernet sustainability, basically a pipeline that will turn off access points after hours across both Cisco DNS Center and Meraki infrastructure. And I can tag which access points I want. So for example, an event venue like this, I don't know when is the next conference, maybe in a few months, maybe in a few weeks. Maybe they don't need all the access points to be up between now and that time. Sports venue, business office, we don't need a high density of access points always be on after hours. I can turn off some that I can tag. I can use specific identifications on which access points I want to turn off after hours, and I want to automate the process to turn them on before the business hour starts next day. So I created a new pipeline from my template. I provided a name. Then I'm copying from a template. I already have a template. I provided you that template. So you are going to copy your pipeline from the Jenkins template from the previous section of the presentation. And then I need to decide on a schedule. And the schedule for me, it's 6 o'clock in the morning to, I believe, 7 o'clock. And in the evening, it will run again. And then I need to customize what I told you. Do I want the latest version of my Python Docker container? In my case, yes. I don't really care. It's not important. But if you have a standard or which image of Docker you need to use, you can customize this. And then this is the only thing that I had to customize. The pipeline name, the Python application, the Jenkins repo with all the code. And once I've done this, I'm ready to run it. It has been built. I'm going to verify the output. And there isn't really anything else I need to change in my pipeline. None of those stages or steps, nothing has changed because it's a typical workflow for Cisco DNS Center APIs. And I'm done. So in the build now, I'm going to run first time the pipeline after I finish to see if it runs. And in that way, I will validate that everything looks good before I go in production. And I can run it now. And we can see it starts building the container, install the libraries, everything that is expected. And at that time, for example, it was like 5 p.m. I had a schedule to allow that to be configured at 5 p.m. It ran and turned down the access points. So I knew the pipeline is good. But then I had another issue that I had to solve. which is what happens if I'm running this pipeline to turn down all the access points at 10 o'clock in the morning. That probably wouldn't be good. So even if my pipeline is scheduled to run to turn down access points between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m., what if one of the network engineers or myself make a mistake and turn on and run this pipeline in the middle of the day? We could, technically, the pipeline would still take down a lot of infrastructure, and that would be catastrophic. So for that reason, what I did, I added some additional capabilities in the code to prevent this. So I'm going to have a schedule in the application itself of where I can prevent. If, for example, it is not between the timers before 7 o'clock in the morning and after, I believe it's between 18 and 24 hours, 6 and midnight, then if it's anywhere outside of these times, I don't want this Python application to take any action. I don't want to turn up or down any ports, any switch ports, because I don't need that. It's basically, it will protect me against running the pipeline basically outside of the specified times when it should run based on a schedule. So for example, in this case, no POU operation. The pipeline was ran at 11 o'clock in the morning, so it didn't take down anything, didn't turn up anything. And if I run it later, it will run as expected, turning down all those access points that I don't need for the night. So let's look at the console. This is the output, basically, of the pipeline when I'm turning down access points. This is based on a schedule. You are going to see in a demo in a second. So we can look at the schedule that the pipeline is scheduled to run basically any hour like 6 p.m. So it's between 6 and 7 a.m. or p.m. And we could see here, I'm going to wait, and you are going to see the pipeline being triggered based on a schedule. It already started to run. I didn't need to do anything. It started basically at 6:51. That is the scheduled time. This time, because I provided an hour, I want between 6 and 7 p.m. Jenkins will pick a random time because it avoids load. It doesn't want all the jobs to start at 6:15, and then you have a high utilization for your CPU. It will pick a random time in that hour that you specified in your schedule. So we can see now that I'm building my container, basically everything that you've seen. But there is something new here. I'm using cached libraries. Because after a time, I decided, why would I download every time the libraries from Cisco, from GitHub for all the libraries that I need? Why wouldn't I use cache information? So I have another slide that shows some optimizations where if you use cache information that is already used by another container, you could save some time. In my case, it's only 10 seconds. It's not necessarily a lot, but if you run a lot of pipelines, it could add up quite a bit of time that you save bandwidth with your internet provider. And we can see here the pipeline continued. It was successfully. We can see basically every stage, every step, how long time it took. And you can see basically, for example, to install the Python libraries was this time was 16 seconds, was just a little bit longer than the average. We have two repos that are important for this session. So the first one is the Jenkins open source with a tutorial that has been published. It's an open source code of how to build these pipelines. We'll give you a quick start of how to start with Jenkins. If you are looking to install Jenkins in your environments, Jenkins has extremely good, very, very good tutorials, helps step-by-step directions of how to install Jenkins, how to start with your pipelines, or how to build your first one, what you need to be aware. The second one is all of these Jenkins automations. I have everything, the Python applications, the Jenkins files. A Jenkins file is basically, as I said earlier, it's a text file with everything that I need Jenkins to perform. So you have access to all of those in that repo. I'm going to end with a few slides about developer resources. What else can you use with Cisco DNS Center? How else are we helping you with any of these libraries? How to automate your workflows? How to accelerate development of your workflows? Here at DEVNET, we have obviously the API documentation for all the versions of Cisco DNS Center. So if you do not run, let's say, a specific version in your production, you can go to DEVNET and identify the version that you want to go to of DNS Center, see what APIs are available, what's changed. We have sample code, we have learning labs, sandboxes. If you don't, how many of you have a DNS Center in your lab? It's great. For those that don't have one, if you want to test an application, if you're working on a code, you can have a sandbox. They are free of charge from DEVNET. You can reserve one, and you can work on your project, or you can use the always one, depends on what you need to do. We have published a Python SDK, covers all the Cisco DNS Center APIs. We have about 460 APIs available. All of them are included in the Python SDK. Last month, we had an average of 3,500 downloads. This is consistent for the last few months. This number continuously increased. Probably about 6 months ago, we were around 1,800 downloads a month. We have an Ansible collection. We published this about 2 years ago. It has been Red Hat certified and community certified, which means every time you install Ansible in your environment, you are going to have the Cisco DNS Center collection installed with that Ansible installation. Again, we are seeing a significant increase also in adoption. We have about 9,200 downloads so far from different developers. We have we are starting to also develop intent modules for Ansible. These are typical playbooks that normally you would develop as a playbook. We are going to create a module that you can use to automate specific workflows. We have a Terraform provider that has currently about 17,800 downloads. This provider includes almost all the Cisco DNS Center REST APIs. There are still some APIs that are not a good match for Terraform workflows, so those APIs are not included with the provider, but we have very good coverage for a lot of APIs. You can automate a lot of workflows with Terraform. The Cisco Enterprise Networking Programmability Organizations is where you can find all of these libraries. You're going to find the Python, Ansible, and Terraform libraries, the Splunk application, the Jenkins tutorials, the open source code. You have compliance use cases. There is a lot of code. I know some of you are starting developing code. This is one place you can go to find open source code that you could use with your Cisco DNS Center. Everything you saw today in the presentation is included in that repo, one of these repos. So why Jenkins is because it will take us to the next step. Instead of us automating a workflow and then I still need to run their automation workflow or use code or versions of applications or versions of libraries that are different, with Jenkins, we are going to have very consistent outcomes. All of us are always going to run the latest code. We are going to use it on the same platform, Jenkins, that is multi-platform supporting both Python applications or any automation or provision tools like Ansible and Terraform. I have our sessions here at Cisco Live. I know some of you came in the past, in the previous days. I have one more session tomorrow. If there is anything important for you from these sessions, please let me know. I can post the content for the sessions in the WebEx room space for this session. And tomorrow, for example, I'm going to present 3 ITSM workflows for the integration with ServiceNow. There is one last ask. If you are interested to win a gift card, there is one catch. There is one question that will be asked, and you have to answer it, and then you can enter a drawing. This drawing is only for my Cisco DNS Center sessions at Cisco Live and the DevNet Zone demo that we have here tomorrow. So it is a pretty good chance for you to win a gift card that you can spend with the Cisco store here or online. Session surveys are very, very important. Please fill up the survey. It's one way for me to learn from you if this session is relevant, how I am presenting, if content like this is important for you. It's one way to adjust and improve this session so they are the best sessions that you can get at Cisco Live. You have also the option in the feedback, basically in the WebEx to ask questions. Please, I encourage you to ask any questions in the WebEx room. even if it's not related to the session today, if you have a question on Cisco Data Center APIs or an integration or a question about something that you are working on workflow with Cisco Data Center API, feel free to ask those questions in the WebEx room, and I will answer every question. Thank you, and please let me know if you have any questions. We still have probably 3 minutes. If not, I'm going to start to ask questions. Any questions? Yes? Docker for the Python. Yeah, so the question is, what's the advantage of running basically Python SDK in the Docker versus running it locally on basically where the OS is running for Jenkins? So one advantage is it's always preferred to run like Python or any applications in some virtualized environment, like a virtual environment for Python, or in Docker. Jenkins makes building a Docker container extremely easy. So instead of me building a virtual environment, because that's what I do. If I run it on my laptop, I build a virtual environment, I download the Python SDK, all the other libraries, and I do it every time. If I use Jenkins, I can build a container with the version of Python that I want, or a different container, could be a Linux container, and then I instruct, instead of building a virtual environment in that container, the container provides the virtualization that I recommend. Because the reason maybe I mentioned, early on I used for a while a Linux server to run applications. Because after some time, a Mac OS upgrade created some problems for some of my libraries. And even with a virtual environment wasn't really enough segmentation. So for me, if I can run either on a virtual environment or on a Docker container, I would prefer the Docker container. It's a lot more reliable than a virtual environment. The other aspect of this is, if I give you a Docker container that I build with this application, I can push it to Docker Hub, give it to you, you can run it, it will run exactly the same. You don't need to change anything. Virtual environments are very good. I'm not saying shouldn't use, but it's a lot better with a container. Any other questions? Is it hard? Would you be interested to continue this journey to use Jenkins and obviously Cisco Data Center REST APIs? Thank you so much. Very much appreciated you came here. It's a privilege to present to you. I know you have a lot of sessions. Thank you for coming to this one.